Okay, let's dive right in. Today, we're talking about a narrow strip of water that's basically got the entire global economy in a chokehold, the Strait of Hormuz. This is a place where geography, money, and power all collide. And believe me, its stability, or lack of it, has a direct impact on the price you pay at the pump.
So first things first, let's just get a handle on how ridiculously important this waterway is. You really can think of it as one of the main arteries of our modern world, the pipeline that fuels entire countries.
And here is the number that says it all. A staggering 25% of all the world's seaborne oil trade, plus about 20% of its liquefied natural gas, gets squeezed through this one tiny spot. So you can see why any disruption here isn't just a regional problem, it's an immediate, full-blown global crisis.
That's what makes the Strait of Hormuz one of the most critical maritime choke points on the entire planet. If you look at a map, you'll see it separates Iran to the north from Oman and the UAE to the south. It's the only way for all that oil in the Persian Gulf to get out to the rest of the world.
And when we say it's a choke point, we mean it. This isn't some vast ocean. For the gigantic supertankers, we're talking ships the size of skyscrapers, the actual shipping lane is only about 3 kilometers wide. That leaves basically zero room for error.
Now, what really makes this whole situation so dangerous is that you have all this economic value crammed into one of the most volatile regions in the world. The Strait has this long, complicated history of tension, and that's where the story turns from just being about trade to being about global security.
And you can really see that shift right here. This place went from being an ancient route for spices and silk to a modern military flashpoint. Back in the 80s, you had the tanker war, where Iran and Iraq were literally attacking each other's oil ships. That led to direct confrontations with other countries like the U.S. Navy's Operation Praying Mantis. And it's not ancient history. Just back in 2019, you had a whole series of mysterious attacks on tankers that put the entire world on edge. This history of conflict has also kicked off some pretty serious legal fights. At the heart of it is this. Under international law, ships are supposed to have a right of transit passage. But because the strait is so narrow, when Iran and Oman extended their territorial waters, they basically erased any international sea lane. So Iran's argument is that those transit rights only apply to countries that signed the treaty, which, by the way, the U.S. has not. And that creates this constant legal and military standoff over who has the right to pass through.
And all of this has led to some very direct, very stark threats from Iranian officials over the years. I mean, this quote right here makes the risk feel incredibly real. It's a clear signal that the strait can and will be used as a weapon.
So, this ever-present threat pushed nearby countries to come up with what they hoped would be the perfect insurance policy, an escape route, if you will, written in steel.
The idea was actually pretty simple and strategically kind of brilliant. If the sea route is vulnerable, why not just go over land? So, Saudi Arabia and the UAE poured billions into building these massive pipelines to pump their oil directly to ports outside the Persian Gulf, completely bypassing the choke point.
But, and this is a really big but, you have to look at the math. Yeah, the pipelines are impressive, for sure, but their combined capacity, around 7 million barrels a day, doesn't even come close to the 21 million barrels that are flowing through the strait.
To put it simply, these hugely expensive, strategic pipelines can only handle about a third of the oil. It's a critical safety net, no doubt, but it shows you the reality of the situation. You can't just build your way out of this problem. 2/3 of the oil is still hostage to the strait, which means the world is still heavily, and I mean heavily, dependent on that waterway staying open.
Okay, so what happens if that flow is disrupted? This is where a regional problem instantly goes global, setting off a chain reaction that hits every single one of us in the wallet.
This chart tells you exactly who feels the pain first. Just look at that. Over 80% of the oil coming out of the strait is heading east, straight to the industrial powerhouses of Asia, China, Japan, India, South Korea. Their entire economies are tethered to the safe passage of these tankers.
But the pain doesn't stop in Asia. Think of it like a set of dominoes. The second that supply to Asia gets cut off, the price for any available oil over there goes through the roof. So, what do oil sellers around the world do? They divert their tankers away from places like Europe and the Americas to go chase those huge profits. The result? A sudden global shortage, and boom, a spike in gas prices for everyone, even in countries like the US that produce a lot of their own oil.
And look, this isn't just a theory, we've seen it happen. When Iraq invaded Kuwait back in 1990, a much smaller disruption than a full Hormuz closure, oil prices more than doubled in just a few weeks. It's a stark historical warning of just how sensitive the global market is to this one choke point.
And all of this leads us to the central paradox of the Strait of Hormuz. It's this high-stakes economic standoff that, for now, is keeping a very fragile peace.
So you have to ask the question, right? If Iran is holding this incredibly powerful economic weapon, a switch that could throw the world into a recession, why hasn't it been used for any long period of time?
Well, the answer is basically a version of mutually assured destruction, but for the economy. First off, closing the strait would absolutely cripple Iran's own economy, since they need it to export their oil too. Second, it would infuriate their most important customers, especially China. And finally, you can bet it would trigger a massive and devastating military response. As one analyst perfectly put it, it would be an act of economic suicide.
So for now, a tense, fragile peace holds. But it does leave us with a final, really interesting question. As the world slowly but surely transitions to new forms of energy, will the immense strategic power of this narrow waterway finally start to fade, or is it destined to remain a global flashpoint for decades to come?